In our third segment here, we're going to talk a little bit about how we want to invest in the future using other people's money. And of course, on February 17th, they announced the Bezos Earth Fund. In the meantime, we've had another announcement from the Senate, which has even more money. It's moved to the Senate. It came from the House of Representatives. It's called H.R. 4447. So we're able to build these first 10 plants with public money or large investor money. So these plants take a lot of money to build. You think it's a lot of money, but in reality it's minuscule compared to the benefits that we get. These two companies, Exactrix and Proton Ventures, have been working diligently on improving the process of building Green Play Ammonia at a very economical price. Just remember that ammonia is about 1 cent per kW. So if a windmill can produce it for 1.2 cents a kW, it costs about $120 a ton to build. So presently, Grand Coulee, as a comparison, is about 3.3 cents a kW. So you would think, well, geez, nobody's more efficient than Grand Coulee Dam at producing power. Well, it's not true anymore. They got it figured out, and it's competition between GE and Siemens that really brought it about. So right now we're at about 1.2 to 1.7 cents a kW, and I anticipate by 2030 that we will actually be priced in about 0.6 of a cent per kW. So it's a very big technological leap ahead that's occurring. So who really knew about the random facts of CO2 and CH4? Not nitrous oxide. Let's just look at this random fact here. China emits the most of any country in the world. They have 80 ammonia mega plants. Eastern Europe, United States, Eastern Europe includes Russia. They're about number 2, and the United States is number 3 at 11.1 million metric tons of ammonia. So you can see where the consumables are at. The Middle East is an exporter of nitrogen, and that's an energy play. Wind power and current ammonia and hydrogen production sites. So you'd say, well, why you guys focus up so much on the Great Plains and the Pacific Northwest? Well, it's really, we're right on top of the Hugoton gas field, T. Boone Pickens' famous Hugoton gas field, cheap gas. Why would we even want to go there with a windmill project? Well, it's because we can outcompete gas in many ways. And we need to leave the gas in the ground for the next generations to come. Maybe 200 years from now, we'll want to go back and take a shot at it again. But here it is, folks, the wind corridor of the Great Plains. And you can see Texas, Amarillo, one of the best areas. Texas is very big in wind towers. Kansas. And we go right over here, right along the Colorado border, and we discover there's even better wind right in there. At about 4,000 feet elevation is where you get the best wind. And that's what's going on. This is a pocket, a corridor of wind in through here. Same in Nebraska. There's a nice corridor right in there. And up here around Yankton, Vermilion, South Dakota, the upper edge of Nebraska, another great wind resource in there. So in the dark blues, they're actually running at full 100% capacity rated. If you go to lighter blues, to the lightest blues, then they only run at about 30% of 100% rating. Here in the Columbia Gorge, we have a tremendous wind resource, Port Kelly, and up in the Snake River Gorge Canyon, at Port Lewiston. So these are the sites that have been picked primarily because they have such great wind characteristics and will allow these giant wind towers to produce most efficiently, most economically, long term, in favorable states. When I say favorable, that's a good business climate in these states. Look at these mega plants in here, these large producers. Oklahoma is loaded with them. Here's a coal-fired plant in Coffeyville, Kansas. Here's another coal-fired plant up around Bismarck, North Dakota, in the more central part of North Dakota called Beulah. Coal-fired plants. Here's another little interesting note. This is a explosives plant right here that builds ammonia to build dynamite. Nitrate, right? And where's it going? All out through these coal mines out in Colorado and Wyoming. You suppose that plant will eventually be converted to a different style of doing business? I think it will. This is a Simplot plant. Over here's another Nobel plant for explosives. And it's the only ammonia plant on the West Coast that's operating today. Even the one in Alaska has been closed down at Kenai. This is the only ammonia plant, and all it does is build explosives. So the ammonia must come from Canada down here into the Washington, Oregon area, northern Idaho. That's where the ammonia comes from to take care of the West Coast. And then there's little seaports down in here that bring it from overseas into California. So where we used to have a tremendous amount of ammonia manufacturing capability in the West Coast, that's all disappeared. Another thing to keep in mind is these are hydrogen plants in the layout. This is stranded anhydrous ammonia right here. There's no place to go. Dodge City's one of them. There's no place for it to go. Amarillo, there's no place for it to go. There's no way to get it down a river. There's no train sets. And they closed the pipeline. This is the one that really took the big hit. Belongs to Nutrien. Lost in time, no storage capability. They were counting on upstream storage. So what did they do? They decided, well, they decided to move to urea. And so you can load that on rail cars, and then you can promote the top dress application of urea. So wind has been the major factor in the Great Plains energy for years, circa this 1910 windmill. Actually, 1886, XIT had 150 windmills that they pumped water with for their 3 million acres. On May 19th, Siemens announced a 14 megawatt windmill. The biggest mill ever built is approximately 15% bigger than the biggest GE mill. So there's a little race going on between these two companies, and that's where we're getting some real competitive effects in bringing down the cost of wind power. The total rotational swing is 2 feet greater than the GE. So they did it with a little more torque. They got the generator to produce a little more production. The result is wind power with more reach. This in turn allows us to produce at 1.2 to 1.7 cents per kW. On Monday, September 28th of 2020, GE announced a new windmill that produced 288 megawatts in 24 hours. That's a 13 megawatt mill. 3/4 of a rotation of that mill will run your house for a full day. Energy costs are dropping, and that's the big change that's going on. 2020 will always be remembered for the big change in energy. Soon, windmill energy will be half of the Grand Coulee Dam in Washington State at 3.3 cents per kW. So, not too far away, we already know Grand Coulee can do it for about 3.3 cents. Been doing it for about 60 years. And we'll continue to do it for another 60 years. But the really clean operation, because you can go local, is a windmill, because you don't have a Columbia River at Hugoton, Kansas. The Cimarron River is not the Columbia River, but you've got Mariah. You've got a river of wind, and that's where you need to get your power from. Only Exactrix no-tillage nutrient banding meets the promise of lowest greenhouse gas emissions. About 6% of the total greenhouse gas emission can be improved with Exactrix Green Play Ammonia and yielder in-fuel energy. That is a 50% improvement of the total 11.2% agricultural contribution to greenhouse gas. The problem is that the other 50% in the description comes from the cows, from the bovine belch. And so they have to figure out how to get the cows to quit burping or capture that methane that's coming off the cow's belly. Here's a great picture in this new era of cooling down the planet. Look at that great crop of triticale. You can see the old cornstalk residue right in through between the rows. And this is a no-till field that's been green chopped in May, late May. They green chopped it off, triticale, went to the dairy to feed the dairy cows. Now they're banding nutrients back in rapidly, covering about 2.5 to 3 center pivots a day. And what are they banding these nutrients for? They're going to plant corn next. So here comes the corn planter, and it'll be raising another crop that'll be harvested in October, November. So it's a case where you can double crop along the Arkansas River. And this is the material they're putting down, taps. They're injecting at 1% CV, and it makes it 166% more crop available. And it's these banders that go into these growing roots that allows the nitrogen to be trapped. The nitrous oxide is not lost into the atmosphere. And we store the carbon. We leave the roots in the ground. We don't stir the embers of the fire. We don't oxygenate all the organic matter. We leave it up and on top. A beautiful sight. Here's some more facts. Whoops, let's go back here. So what is the crucible of taps and tapcatus? It's this injection process. As you saw in the picture here, we are able to inject these nutrients in very deep in the soil. In this particular case, 7 inches below the ground line. And we're injecting 3 different products. And this is ammonia in the red here with varying pHs. And you notice that's a little different color scheme and change into there. That's called vermiculation. And so we're putting nutrients down in a vertical band as deep as it'll go, but not all the nutrients are at the bottom. They're in a vertical band. So as the roots come out and they proliferate, they find these vertical bands, and they're able to utilize them much more efficiently than the old shank bow tie application. Very critical part of the story is to do it no-till. Since these bands remain for 2 and 3 years and beyond, they're crop available for future crops. You can get out to your 6th year and just skip a year. Don't even fertilize. You've got enough bands in the ground that you can raise a nice high-yielding crop without having to fertilize because of residual carryover. It's called rotational band loading. Here's something as we progress back towards the fossil fuel discussion that you're really going to enjoy. There's hydrogen, H2. And these are the costs of hydrogen. Okay. Notice it gets up there to about 6.4. Look at ammonia. It's down about 4.2. And methanol is about 5.4. It's all related to distribution, transmission, dispensation, fuel production, into CO2 capture costs, H2 storage, H2 gathering, H2 production. Well, Montgomery, everybody's been talking about using straight hydrogen. They're talking about using straight electricity to make the hydrogen. Well, the key point is to make the ammonia first and then burn the ammonia. That's the end of the line for it. And it's so much more economical than straight hydrogen, as well as methanol, as well as ethanol. But the game is not over, because we've got to measure the emissions of the CO2. And of all these three methods, which has the lowest CO2 emission? And it's right here, ammonia, and you can store it. You can store it in those steel tanks that you paid $2 a gallon for, you know, back in 1980, $2 a gallon. And today, that tank's worth $4 a gallon. What are you talking about? That can't be true. It is true, because the only asset on the farm that does not depreciate, it's the battery. It's the whole secret. It solves the storage problem. And it's all done locally. Right next to your farm, you can go fill up with ammonia. So we have much safer approaches for delivering the NH3, much safer than the old-fashioned co-op method with the trailers. And you can get it on time. You can get it 24/7 if you want it, because the ammonia tank's on your farm. And the lowest production cost in corn production is taps and tap tests. This is all time proven, all been tested by growers. You get top results, you get great production, you get another $150 more net income per acre. That means the risk goes way down. And on top of that, it's approved by the state fire marshals. These techniques that you're looking at here, these are approved Western techniques for delivery. It's much like propane. Same story. Well, let's look at the energy content here. And by the way, this graph is been colored by the denotation that green is good. The green color is the GreenPlay. These are the alternatives in yellow. And these are some of the other bad players in more or less white. And there's even dual fueling discussed in this chart. But let's go pick the first two GreenPlays, and let's go look at their concentrations. Green Play Ammonia has 40,571 BTUs per gallon. And ethanol, which is made green from the use of Green Play Ammonia to produce Green Play ethanol, has 76,100 BTUs per gallon. This means that we have a tremendous product related to corn and transportation and heating, heat treating, asphalt production can all be done with these two products, keeping the carbon out of the system, because NH3 has no carbon. Well, let's go look at biodiesel. You thought biodiesel might be a choice. Well, it kind of is if it's in rotation with Green Play corn. But biodiesel has a problem because it has a carbon constituent in the plant oil. Pretty concentrated, but not as good as good old number 2 diesel fuel with a little bit of sulfur in it. Or if you take the sulfur out, you improve it environmentally, but you don't get quite as much power. So biodiesel and low sulfur diesel are kind of there, but not a choice. They're concentrated, heavy, but they are not the right choice. So in the process of looking at these charts, you begin to understand. Hydrogen, H2 is only 16,000, at 10,000 psi, and hydrogen at 5,000 psi is 6,500 BTUs. So hydrogen is just not a player. It's not concentrated. It's not heavy hydrogen. H2 is not heavy hydrogen. NH3 is heavy hydrogen. Methane, the last thing you want. Natural gas, not concentrated and loaded with carbon. Has some pretty nice burning characteristics, but once again, fossil fuel. Methanol, not as good as ethanol. Methanol is wood alcohol. Propane, aha. Now there is a concentrated fuel, but loaded with carbon. So we're going to run ammonia. We may not quite run as far with ethanol, but we will produce it clean, and we'll have lots of power. And Green Play Ammonia, if you want to fuel your locomotive with straight ammonia, you can. And that's a total green play. This one's really interesting. As you begin to understand corn, what you can do in grain alcohol, ethanol, you can raise it totally green. The pivots can run with ammonia to fire the engines or the turbines. The electrical grid can run with Green Play Ammonia. All things considered, the ethanol plant itself can do all of its heating with ammonia. Just turn off the gas pipeline and just start running ammonia. Great story here in this chart. You just need to study it a little bit more. These are the fuel sources. And these are the ones that are fading away. The ones in the green are green to go. These are good to go. Green to go. Well, let's move on to our next part of the story. And you're starting to say, well, who runs this show? Who calls the shots? How come we got in this mess? Why did we end up warming up the planet, melting the ice caps? What is all that? Who figured this stuff out? Well, the problem is, under the Reagan administration, we got rid of the Tennessee Valley Authority, which are actually the people that were responsible 50, 60 years of development work, developing commercial fertilizers and having the control and the moral suasion over the fertilizer industry. We have gone through an era without regulation, and there comes the oligarchs. If somebody's not going to control me, I'm going to run it my way. It's free enterprise, I'll run it my way. And the fertilizer dealers lost their regulatory people that visited them, told them how to market properly and fairly, things you can say and you can't say in the business. Canada, there's a lot of things you can't say that are totally legal in the U.S. So let's just call this whole scenario, since 1986 up until now, it is the environmental flop of the wild, wild west of the fertilizer oligarchs. The grip on the industry remains tight, and there's a new sheriff in town. So we have to watch, because there's going to be a showdown. The billionaires are going to take on the billionaires of fertilizer. Their days of waste and dirty air are over. There is no incentive for them to go to wind power. They can only promote carbon, fossil fuel power in their old-fashioned mega plants. It is actually a national security problem. We only have 40 of these mega plants, and they need to go away. They will over time. They'll get paid for. Most of them are already paid for. In the case of Koch brothers, those plants are paid for. They're old plants. They're 50 years old. Let's go back, just about ready to conclude here. Let's talk about yield or in-fuel on a small scale. I want to talk to you about a small scale, a local place, a place you can go. Right down in Hastings, Nebraska, there's a windmill. And you can pull in there and fill up your truck or you can have us bring a truckload out to you, to your storage tanks. Right there in Amarillo, Texas, Groom, Texas, you can watch the wind blow. You know you're in the windiest corridor in the nation, and any day the wind's blowing, you're building assets in the form of anhydrous ammonia. Keep in mind that ammonia has an average price over the last 20 years of about $300 a ton. But there have been years when corn prices moved and the oligarchs could control the price of ammonia, and they raised it. It was not related to the cost of fossil fuel. It was related to what they could get away with. So a lot of fear marketing tactics occurred in the 2003 to the 2014, 2015 period, trying to control the supply and raising the price of ammonia up to $800 to $1,000 a ton at the retail level. So when ammonia is $300 a ton, it's the same as gas being $1.75 a gallon, gasoline being $1.75 a gallon. So ammonia can be produced from zero carbon energy, hydro, nuclear, wind. It has, with very significant CCSs, and at the lowest cost of capture of any hydrocarbon process. Ammonia, diesel engines are proven and essentially equivalent in cost, either with diesel blending, pre-cracking, or advanced engines. Ammonia turbines with pre-cracking to produce hydrogen is a component of the fuel, and it's efficient and flexible. And on top of that, I think it's important to note that we have in Japan a company by the name of Toyota that has figured out how to burn ammonia directly in a turbine and control nitrous oxide emissions by raising the temperature and mixing it properly with an afterburner. So ammonia fuel cells are highly desirable, and their remote use for power is known for cell towers, operating at half the cost of diesel fuel with about a 57% energy conversion efficiency. The fuel cells running on ammonia provide about 4 kWh of power at 48 volts for 1 year from a 12-ton supply of a 5,000-gallon storage tank. So if you have a cell tower up on a remote mountain, you just fire it up and run a fuel cell with ammonia. Very low emissions and zero CO2 results from this technique. In fact, I know you're interested. How can you burn ammonia? I was always told it was non-explosive. Well, it is. But at a certain pressure and mix with atmospheric air, it will burn at about 23%. And this is the ammonia flame that you see right here in this picture. So you can use it for heat treating of steel. You can use it in a corn dryer. You have a lot of possibilities for asphalt plants. You can clean it up. This is what the little pattern looks like in the burning processor here. The swirling flow. They got to swirl and get a more complete blend. In conclusion, this is a superimposed picture, by the way. That's a giant wind tower. This is a Canadian storage system. But it's entirely feasible by 2030 that this wind tower will be sitting right next to this ammonia storage plant. So when you're in a remote area, you're long distances involved, you run Rocky Mountain doubles, you notice the trailers here, big tractor tank and a pup, a smaller pup. These are the delivery trucks going to the field. These are the 30,000-gallon storage tanks. Remember, these go up in value. They go up in value. They don't go down in value, they go up in value. These are the liquid tanks in the green. It's the polyphosphate and the thiazole and the potassium thiosulfate are in those tanks. This is Farm Central. This producer here is looking at 150 more net dollars an acre. That's a lot of money. In the farming game, that's the most money that I just don't know of any other process that will make you that much more money. And yet he'll be able to fuel his canola corn dryer. He'll utilize it to power his farmstead. he may be running these trucks on anhydrous ammonia before it's all said and done. Well, that's all I got to say today, and I'd like to say thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you.